Hey friends, we're Tim and Kimberly at Hope Rescue Podcast, and we are coming to you with the series on money. Oh, I know you're excited. No? Okay. Well, we are in our third and final on this little mini series. We talked about how to be financially blessed, and we made distinctions between false and true blessings. We talked about how to avoid financial failure. And we gave 5 really important steps. If you need to go back and listen to those will be on our archive at hoperescuepodcast.org, and invite friends to hear that practical advice on how to deal with finances. But today we're going to talk about how to find the greatest treasure.
Greatest treasure.
You're my greatest treasure.
Oh, you're my greatest treasure. Give me a smooch.
Oh,
everybody's grossed out right now.
That's disgusting.
Listen, when I read Greatest Treasure, I immediately go back to, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I go back to my early childhood because I feel like forever I have been a treasure hunter.
Yeah.
Like as an adult, that plays out differently. I am a thrifter to the core, and I take one day a week, usually Tuesdays, and I'll give myself about 2 hours to hit a couple of thrift stores. And I have found some of the coolest stuff. Now, maybe it's not cool to other people, but I have found some cool treasures through the years. Yeah. And it, for me, it's a hobby, but also it came from a place of having less and wanting to like decorate my home or whatever. Yeah. And then this whole world opened to me. But in my youth, I remember being a kid and digging on the hillsides and in sand, and dreaming about finding treasures. And I remember we moved into a house. My dad was a house flipper. My parents were, as young adults. They started very early to be able to make an extra income as pastors. They would buy these little kind of really janky rundown homes. And our job as kids was to pick up the backyard, to pull weeds, to sweep, that kind of stuff. And I remember one day finding in the backyard on a hillside this kind of a corner of a box sticking out from the side of the hill. And I'm like, what? So I start digging away and I open it, and in this box is a handful of costume jewelry from the 1970s. This is like the early 70s that somebody, probably another little girl that lived there before me, had put out there. And you would have thought I had pure gold. I absolutely freaked out. So exciting. But that was my version of treasure in the day. Have you ever been a treasure hunter?
No. No, I don't. When I think of treasure, I think of,
Pirates.
Treasure Island. Army mateys. He's a bad man, says I, says he.
Yes. And I think that actually is funny because I don't think I've ever been to the ocean that I haven't thought maybe I can find something's going to wash ashore, magically. Yeah. It did actually happen once when we were in Hawaii, and I found a gold bracelet in the sand. That was pretty cool.
By the way, when I do a pirate accent, I have to do this with my mouth.
Yeah, it's because
I can't do it over on the other side.
Because they were missing teeth, so they had to speak out of one side or something. Yeah. But anyway, the bottom line is, what if your version of treasure, like pirates with their gold and their jewelry, whatever, what if it's not really treasure at all? And according to Scripture, it's not. It's not in the monetary. It's not in the gold and the wealth and the having extra. It comes from things like family, being around God's people, valuing the things of the spirit over the flesh, right? Yeah. Those are the real treasures in life. And discovering that will be our key to discovering true joy and happiness, for sure.
Yeah, one of the things I wrote down thinking about this podcast, I wrote down this statement. What if you've been looking for the buried treasure your whole life and you've pushed aside everything that is your greatest treasure? For example, your family, your church connections,
relationship with Christ,
maybe even God.
Yeah.
So you're so busy getting what you think is going to be the great treasure. Yeah, I think we've done that. All of us have done that to a certain extent. So when we talk about a treasure, we need to know what the real treasure is. And we just wanted to share a few points about what this treasure is. And the first thing we wanted to share about treasure hunting is, number one, hunt for true treasure. So this is what it says in Matthew 6:19. Do not lay up for yourself treasures on earth. Well, that's pretty convicting. Where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. I love how when you really understand what God is saying to us in this biblical principle, Jesus made this statement, don't lay up treasures on earth. And the reason is because it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
It can be eaten by moth if it's clothing. It could rust out if it's a metal. If it were something like a precious gold, it could be stolen. So he gives the reasons why. So God is really concerned about your joy. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor or rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. So when you put something in heaven, you invest in heaven. When you give it away, it is no longer in your possession. It doesn't matter what happens to that, how it's used by the church or how it's used by a charitable organization or how it's used by even a poor person, somebody that you've helped out, whether they abuse it or not. You've given as unto the Lord. That is stockpiled for you. So when we give, we are actually putting it in the heavenly account, and it can't be stolen.
Yeah, I love that.
Can't
That's
be
so good.
taken away.
The second point is don't believe the definition of treasure by the world's system. Oh my goodness. Our world, all it takes is turning on your TV, your smartphone, whatever, and you will have a flood of things that you think you need to have. I think, honestly, the world sells us a bill of goods saying, you got to have more of everything, number one.
More is
having
better.
one of that thing is not enough. Status is what the world will tell you is treasure. Wealth is treasure. And then the wealthy know that there is an insatiable appetite for more things because you see somebody else that has something. It's like this massive hole in your heart that just you keep trying to stuff it with things that you think is going to satisfy. Even relationships that you're not meant to have can become your version of a treasure, and they leave you feeling empty. It's like this purse that has a bottom that is empty, and we need to make sure that we don't confuse and confabulate God's version of wealth versus the world's version of wealth, because the world's version of wealth will leave us feeling empty and vacant every single time. Let's look at what does the word say is a treasure. There's a passage in James 5:1, and it says this. Do you want me to read it? Or you want
Go ahead. That's great.
Come now, you rich. This is going to break it down, folks, so listen good. Weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you.
That's a warning.
Your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. He is not mincing words here.
Yeah.
You've laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which kept you back by fraud, are crying out against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts.
Let me stop you there. So understand what he's saying. He's not saying it's wrong to be rich. He's not saying that all rich people have hollow wealth. What he's saying is, as the last verse that you read, behold the wages of the laborers who mowed your field, which you kept back by fraud. You fraudulently cheated them. You fraudulently got gain. And that's why your wealth is screaming out against you. The fact that you're wealthy off the back of the laborers is really sad.
Yeah.
The abuse of laborers in societies may lead to extreme overreaction. But what should happen is the laborer should receive a fair wage for his work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
And verse 5 says, you've lived, this is to the rich, you have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you.
Yeah.
Well, that's like a big verbal spanking.
Yeah. Well, that's James' approach.
Yeah.
He's a
He
tough,
didn't mess
tough
around.
guy. The third thing is this: once you have true treasure, treasure it. It sounds like double talk, but somebody has a treasure, they don't treasure it. I know.
Can I speak to that just really
Yeah,
quick?
sure.
It's because I think what happens is when we are in a mindset of building wealth, once you get it, it loses its value because you're trying to get the next thing.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's been emptied of its value. It doesn't matter anymore because you're not pursuing it anymore.
Yeah. When you first get a car, now you have done a good job of treasuring your car.
I love my car.
I gave that car to you for a birthday present, and you've had it for several years. You still,
8 years. Yeah.
you still
I love
treasure
her.
that.
Her name's Ruby.
Yeah,
she's a gem.
Disgusting, but anyway, actually, you have kept it better than any car I've ever kept. It's in beautiful shape.
She's been good to me.
No accidents, no dents, no nothing. Anyway, you have treasured it. And it's not because you're materialistic, but you were just very grateful for that.
Enjoy it, yeah.
And even though, there are,
It's a Jeep. In case you're wondering,
challenges,
it's not a Jaguar.
yeah, we
It's
don't.
a good Jeep.
We would treasure a Volkswagen. I drive a Honda, and it's great. Don't care that much about it, but I've never been a guy that loves cars. But anyway, to learn to treasure something when
Yeah.
you first get it, it's so easy to treasure it, and then as time goes on, as you just mentioned, it kind of loses
Not
its
so sparkly anymore.
yeah, and it could be still sparkly. We're just used to it. And that is a really sad place to be. When you learn to treasure, I love what Jesus said in Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Yes.
And what he's saying is, whatever you have treasured, your heart will be there. I mentioned this before, that if you treasure your spouse, your heart will not be vulnerable to another person. And to be drawn into a relationship, especially an illicit relationship, if you're treasuring your spouse. If you treasure your husband, another man will not be able to pull you away. The same as if you treasure your wife. It's really important for us to understand that treasuring is a decision we make.
Right.
And we do it every day. Kimberly and I, we really do treasure each other. I'm going to read somewhat of a long passage, but I hope as I get through this, we'll be able to kind of pull this together. And I'll just kind of comment. We can talk about this as we go through it. It says this in Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Jesus is giving this speech. I love it when I'm giving a speech and somebody yells out a question. But this is what happened. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." He's got a grievance and he wants him to take care of it while he's speaking to hundreds of people. But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist of the abundance of possessions." And he told them a parable. So this guy yells out in the crowd, "Hey, my brother's not giving me my fair share." Obviously, if you understand this, the way this works, the oldest son in a family, in a Jewish family, was in charge of the inheritance. The inheritance was determined how that would be divided, but the son would do the division after the death of the parent. So the father dies and then the oldest son distributes, but this guy wasn't distributing the fair amount. So he appeals to Jesus, and Jesus said, "Wait, what? I'm not going to intervene in this," but he does teach some lessons on the power of satisfaction, the power of contentment, the deception of wealth, and he shares a parable, and he says this. This is the parable. The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have nowhere to store my crops." And he said, I got it. I will do this. I will tear down the barns and build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. The goal of life is not to eat, drink, and be merry. The goal of life is always to glorify God. That's the goal of our life. You know, I look at my life and I say, you know, at some point I'm going to retire and kind of relax, but I can't totally retire from life. I've got children, I've got grandchildren, I've got people in the church that I can minister to. As long as I have breath, I need to give back.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, you can slow down, but you can't stop. You got to keep moving. You got to keep moving for the glory of God. And there'll be plenty of time to rest in heaven, but until then, keep moving. So this is what the one who lays up treasure for himself is not rich toward God. And he said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body or what you will put on, for life is more than food. And there's neither, I'm sorry, I lost my track here. Let's
More,
see where
it's not just what you'll eat, nor about your body or what you'll put on, for life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens; they neither sow nor reap; they have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them.
Okay, so think about this: birds are beautiful, and God does care and love them. They're part of His creation.
Yep.
But they're not created in the image of God. How much more important are you to God than a bird? And yet he makes sure that they understand. They understand to store up for the winter. They understand the work that's involved in creating nests and so forth and feeding their young, taking care of their young. But the reality is God takes care of them much more. So he says to his disciples, don't worry about it.
Yep.
Do you know where you left off there?
It says here, you just talked about the verse 25. It said, about the birds. 25 says, and which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? If then you are not able to do as a small thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest?
Let's stop there for a minute. You cannot expand your life. There is an appointed time. Here I am in my 70s. I'm actually the age my dad was when my dad died. And next year I'll be older than him if I continue on.
And the year after that, and the year after that, in Jesus' name.
There you go. But the reality is,
et cetera.
you know, at some point, it's time to go home. That's appointed by God. And you can't change that. Now, you can eat healthy and so forth and exercise and all those things, and those are good things to do. But the reality is that God is in charge of that. Okay,
yeah,
go
we
ahead.
can't be anxious about it. And then it says, consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil or spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith?
Yeah, you know, we have this. We don't have a stitch of grass on our property
That's
anymore.
real anymore.
Yeah, we have turf only, and we did that. You know, the drought, doing our part to, you know,
not pay the water
save
bill.
on water and not pay the water bill. Although
Yes.
it's amazing how you still get a water bill. I don't know. It's your long showers.
No, babe.
You're a short shower person. So am I. I think it's our daughter's long shower. Anyway, you know, the reality is that God has beautifully, when you go out in nature and see the trees and grass and flowers and lilies and all of these things, God cares about that. And yet when we are lacking in faith, when we don't see his value
Provision.
to clothe us. And he
Yes.
says this in verse 29, and do not seek what you are to eat or what you are to drink, nor be worried. Don't be anxious. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows what you need. And he knows what you need before you even need it.
Yep.
Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added unto you.
Yeah, that's
So,
the boom right there, the mic drop.
prioritize the kingdom, the search
all
and the
these
pursuit of the
things,
kingdom.
all
Yeah.
these things that you consider your treasure. What is your treasure? All of these things that he has spoken to that are actual treasure will be added to you.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the trust factor.
So hunting for treasure, hunt for the true treasure.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that. Number 2, don't believe the definition treasured by the world system. And number 3,
Mm-hmm.
once you have a true treasure, treasure it.
Yeah.
If you could hold dear what
Yes.
God has provided. I'll close with this this little vignette. And I've shared this before, and I don't know if I shared it on the podcast, but I was in Africa, and I was outside of Nairobi in this desert area, and it was this family that lived there, and their child was going to a school and had a nice skirt on and a uniform that went with this Christian school that Compassion International had provided. So this was a sponsored child. And she wanted us to go to their home. So we went to their home. We drove over there. She always walks it. It's about 2 miles. She walks it both ways. And we showed up, and we're driving along this fence, and I see this mud hut, and that's their house. Yeah. And we went into their house, and I was like, wow, this is just a mud hut. No lights, no plumbing, no nothing. But they had just built this house
They were
out
so
of
proud
mud.
of it. Yeah.
And they were so proud of it. And they were almost apologetic about living, because it was a large mud house. And it was just, they were so thankful, so grateful, this Christian family. What are you thankful for in your life? If you could learn to be grateful and treasure what God has given to you, your life will be filled with joy. You may not have much, and you may have much. The key is not to love what you don't have, but love what you do have,
good.
and be grateful for God, to God, for what he's provided. So thank you for listening to this series, a little short series on money. And we'll continue on with the new series next time. Thank you for listening to Hope Rescue Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.